Hi there, this is Chris from MoneyHub, and this video looks at Singapore travel money. So we've put together a comprehensive guide, which is linked down below. You can have a read of this, and this is going to be what I walk through now. What the purpose of this video, is to show you exactly what the different options are. Plenty of New Zealanders visit Singapore every year. There's 3 or 4 flights a day, and even more during the summer period. Some people from New Zealand, or some New Zealanders, sorry, just stop over. Some of them, spend a week there, spend 2 weeks there, visit family, etc., etc. Some people also move there for work. So what we'll do is look at the 3 different options: using cash, using New Zealand issued debit and credit cards, and then using travel money cards. Singapore has become quite expensive. It didn't used to be so expensive. Hotels, dining, alcohol, certainly very expensive now. Lots of activities. So what we've done is we're just going to walk through the different options, and I'm going to explain the different rates and the different tools and the different services you can do to pay for things in Singapore. Let's go straight to it, and that is using cash. So Singapore is quite advanced in the fact that they are becoming increasingly cashless, and that's been a factor pre-COVID as well. It's not just a COVID thing. The problem is, within New Zealand, there's very little opportunity to get Singapore dollars before you fly into Singapore. Now, Westpac is the only option currently, and if you go down into the Westpac currency tables, you can see that they do offer Singaporean dollars. So they have a buy rate and they have a sell rate, and this is change. So change New Zealand dollars into foreign cash, and if we go down back to Singapore, you can see there that the rate is 0.7849. Now these are updated multiple times per day, but it's important just to be aware of that whilst I do some comparisons. What people do is they look at services like Travelex and Number One Currency. You will see these at the airport, certainly Christchurch and Auckland. The best thing here is now to have a look at these. So if we wanted to compare the Singaporean dollar, and if we have, say, 1,000, then we can see that the rate that they're offering is going to be 0.764. That is much lower than the Westpac rate of 0.7849. So it's about 3% lower for Travelex than it is for Westpac. And then if we compare that to, of course, Number One Currency, and just have to see me change that there, you can see that the rate is 0.7633. Now, all these are done at the same time. These are live rates, certainly. And so you can see they're actually lower than Travelex, just slightly. And 7633 is lower than 7642, which is in itself much lower than what Westpac offers. Now, the other option is to have a look at withdrawing money from your bank. What will happen there is that you will pay the market rate, and that's going to be pretty much the Google rate, plus an ATM fee, plus any commission which your bank will charge. So this is if you're using your debit card, hopefully not your credit card. The problem there is that some banks charge a lot. For Kiwi Bank, it's $6. Westpac and ANZ have introduced free ATM overseas. So you will, of course, see some variability based on which bank you're currently with. What we've found is that, as you've just seen here, is that the Forex booths are not that cheap compared to what you're going to get from Westpac. That does seem to be the situation going forward. It's not just at this moment. We monitor this quite so closely and quite regularly. And so Westpac is not going to also be as good as what you'll see from Wise. If I just go and show an example of that now. So going straight into the Wise site, which you can see here, so we can currently see that the rate is going to be 0.8024, and there are some fees on that. This is certainly just for $1,000. But if we go through, and once we do, this is for a money transfer, but if you were to then load it onto your wallet, you would see that, that would be the rate. It works out to about 0.8 or point sort of 7999, which is much higher, of course, than what you're seeing from TravelX and certainly from Number One Currency and also Westpac as well. So that is something to be aware of, and we've made it very clear here that if you do withdraw money with your Wise card, then you're going to get a free allowance of up to about $350 New Zealand per month without charging the transaction fee, which is around 280 Singaporean dollars. Now, certainly if you are there for a short time, that's very useful to have as way as cash, and that wouldn't go against your allowance for transactions. So if you do make $500 worth of card transactions, then that doesn't use up your free fee allowance for ATM withdrawals. That's just another use of the money. So that is something that we've explained here. Pros and cons of using cash. Of course, it's generally going to be universally accepted, but there are some restrictions. So some places will just say no cash. That will then force you to rely on your card. And of course, if you have the cash, there's no card machine issues or anything like that, and no fraud. Not that Singapore is a high risk place for that. Cons of having cash: of course, Singapore is very safe, but you will need to store it. And then airport exchange, we just feel that it is expensive to do. So if you are prepared to, get the money from an ATM, from a kiosk or something like that, you will pay a convenience tax, which is going to be probably around 5%, generally of a worse rate than you'd otherwise get from using your bank card or something like a Wise or a Revolut card. If you do have Singaporean dollars left, we've made it very clear here that you can just use them up. This is before you depart. You can make part payments. That's very popular. Convert them back to New Zealand dollars, of course. You're probably not going to get a great rate, but it's more useful than having money that you can't spend it within New Zealand, and then also gifting them as well. Now, the second option here is using the debit and credit cards that are issued by New Zealand banks. So that's very common, but there are fees, as I previously said. Some of them charge up to around 2.5%. For debit cards, Co-op Bank currently 2.6%. Of course, these fees can change at any time. So it is high. Usually, we don't like to see people use this because it just adds up. And if you spend, $2,000, you're sort of spending $30 on FX fees, which doesn't sound like much in the scheme of things, but those things do add up, and it's also just kind of annoying because you may not get the best exchange rate either. And of course, Visa has known from our previous research to have lower FX rates than MasterCard. And so if you are using like a New Zealand bank, a lot of them are issued with Visa, so you will pay more overall in most cases. So what we've done is we've done some extra research here, which we could encourage people to have a read of. But generally, using New Zealand bank card for travel in Singapore, it's certainly very convenient. It's going to be accepted everywhere, and as long as it's MasterCard or Visa, sometimes there are limitations with Amex, and of course you can track all your expenses on your banking app. No problem there. So some of the cons, as I previously said, is going to be the high charges, and then you may get into a situation of this awful thing called dynamic currency conversion. That is where you find that you're offered, if you're paying for something in Singapore, it's going to say, oh, would you like to pay this in New Zealand dollars? So then they take a commission, and sometimes they display what that is, and sometimes they don't. So you usually get a terrible rate, usually some sort of 10% convenience charge, and it's just a big rip-off. And then potential card issues. Very low risk in Singapore, but we have said skimming or even captured by ATMs. Singapore is very advanced, so it's not really a risk, but it's certainly something that, of course, can happen anywhere. And if you are traveling beyond Singapore, then there may be different risks depending on where you go. So we are fans of people using cards within Singapore. It is convenient, but there are just a lot of fees being charged by the banks. They're not exactly racing to be cheap in this sort of area because it is quite lucrative for them just add on their fees, take their profits, not really provide much, and just like hope that people don't switch to anything cheaper. You do risk also not getting the best rates. So that's something to be aware of. And then finally, looking at travel money cards. Now we have comprehensively compared these, and it is worth having a look at our comparison. We look at the Travelex card, we look at the New Zealand card for travel money, we look at the Wise card, we look at Revolut, and we look at a couple of others. So that's something to be aware of, and we've done a lot of comparisons in that space. In this case, we look at the Wise card. That's primarily because it has the best rates, it has the lowest fees currently in the market. We have seen that Revolut has entered, but the problem there is that it's a great card as well, but it does have this 1% penalty fee for a weekend FX transactions. And so if you are finding yourself somewhere and it's over the weekend in the UK, there is a surcharge for transactions during that time. So we're not huge fans of that. And as a result, we have found the Wise card to be simpler for people to activate, and certainly a product which is a lot more popular every year. So our view there is that Wise is acting as a travel money card through its Wise account. You've got the physical card and you've got the digital debit card as well. And you can also store Singaporean dollars in advance should you want to. So you can buy them, you can top up your New Zealand dollars and then just change some of those into Singaporean dollars and put them in a digital wallet. That is very helpful for people if they want to lock in an exchange rate. But at the same time, you don't need to always. You can also just keep the New Zealand dollars as they are, and then for every transaction that you make, it will be charged at the exchange rate at that very time, which of course moves almost every second. But within a day, it's pretty stable. So that is something which people do. And if you are only in Singapore for a short time, we've made it clear that if you are, for example, transiting, then it's a popular option just to keep New Zealand dollar balances. And this way you don't lock in an exchange rate and things like that. And also you don't have to convert them back from Singaporean dollars to New Zealand dollars or something other, like some other currency, if you don't use them, because that just means you're paying more FX fees. There is a limit, as I said, for free withdrawals, but as Singapore is increasingly cashless, then around $350 per month New Zealand seems fairly reasonable. Of course, some places, hawker stands, prefer cash, but increasingly I was there 6 months ago from this video, and it was widely accepted cards across more informal places to eat as well, so that was a promising sign. So pros and cons of Wise debit card and other travel money cards. So the acceptance here is that you can use them everywhere that Visa and MasterCards are taken. They've got highly competitive rates, certainly that's for Wise. Multi-currency, you can store like Singaporean dollars and other ones as well. Very transparent fees, and then instant notifications. So you can see those wherever you're spending, if you have Wi-Fi activated, or if you have roaming, and then otherwise you'll see it on the app when you get back. And of course, when you get back to some sort of connectivity. The cons here is that there is a limit of the $350 before you get the fee, and also it's not a credit card. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's just we're just advising people there that it's not something that you can go into debt on. Must know tips for using money in Singapore, quite important. Just be careful, of course. It does have a very low crime rate, but it's always good to be careful because you can never be sure. And cards are common, so that's just the way things have gone. But cash still has its place for now. Hawker stands, as I previously said, food courts, things like that, street food. But I think for most people, cards are pretty standard and cash is very limited. Mobile payments, you can use Apple Pay, Google Pay alongside where cards are taken. And then you can keep track of your expenditures. That's using, of course, like a Wise debit card, but also on your bank as well. Not quite as convenient if you do use your bank, because it's not as user-friendly. You may see other transactions coming in and out of your bank account if you have direct debits or anything like that. But we like the app from Wise, for example, which just has everything tracking. And at the same time, Revolut can also track and group and kind of budget index your expenses, which is useful as well. And then if you are shopping, we've just said that return policies, you may see the same stores that you'll see within New Zealand, the same chains, but their return policies may be different. So do just check there. They have, of course, use Commonwealth law, but it's not the same as New Zealand. So just be aware. Just be aware of that. Now, converting New Zealand dollars to Singaporean dollars, they're frequently asked questions here. And well, the rate does kind of move around, but it is somewhat stable. We've seen movements from around 0.78 to 0.82. There was a time 20 years ago when it was the New Zealand dollar was stronger than the Singaporean dollar, but things have changed. Singapore's become a high cost, sort of high growth economy, and that has meant that the currency has strengthened. And that is why now you do have to pay a few more New Zealand dollars for the same thing in terms of Singaporean dollars. You can use your travel money card or NZ debit card or credit card everywhere in Singapore. There's just a wide acceptance of card. It's a very transactional economy. And then the third question there is, Singapore expensive for New Zealand tourists? The answer is yes, it can be. Just because of hotel costs, and there's just a huge demand for certain seasonal events, Formula One, things like this, Chinese New Year. So there might be price spikes. And then also alcohol is routinely very expensive. It's very regulated there, and so that's something to be aware of. And what's the best way to get the most Singaporean dollars for New Zealand dollars? The answer there is usually a travel money card like Wise or Revolut, something that leads with a very high exchange rate and low fees. The worst way is probably, or almost certainly, using one of the kiosks at the airport, because you will pay a high fee by way of a low exchange rate for that money, and then you are stuck with the cash, which if you don't use, you'd have to convert back, and of course the rates then are not going to be the rates that you exchange it at, so it can get quite expensive quite quickly. Now, finally, our conclusion, we are very much a fan of cards, of course. Cash is moving out of fashion, and we're like a fan of leading travel money cards, just so you can track everything, and you have everything that if you want to lock in certain exchange rates or just have some travel wallets there. So Wise and Revolut are certainly options in that gut, but we have focused with the Wise debit card just because of the ease of the use. So thanks very much for watching this video. If you do have any questions, let us know in the comments below. We are highly responsive to these. We have other guides to different countries. Of course, one close by is Thailand, and we also have Bali. So do have a look out for those. They're all on the channel. And thanks very much for watching.